Education in Australia is primarily the responsibility of the states and territories. Each state or territory government provides funding and regulates the public and private schools within its governing area. The federal government helps fund the public universities, but was not involved in setting university curriculum. As of 2012, the Australian national curriculum, under development and trial for several years, has already been adopted by some schools and will become mandatory soon. Generally, education in Australia follows the three-tier model, which includes primary education, followed by secondary education and tertiary education. The Programme for International Student Assessment 2006 evaluation ranked the Australian education system as 6th for reading, 8th for science and 13th for mathematics, on a worldwide scale including 56 countries. The PISA 2009 evaluation ranked the Australian education system as 6th for reading, 7th for science and 9th for mathematics, an improvement relative to the 2006 rankings. In 2012, education firm Pearson ranked Australian education as 13th in the world. The Education Index, published with the UN's Human Development Index in 2008, based on data from 2006, lists Australia as 0.993, amongst the highest in the world, tied for first with Denmark and Finland. Education in Australia is compulsory between the ages of 5 and 15 to 17, depending on the state or territory, and date of birth. Post-compulsory education is regulated within the Australian Qualifications Framework, a unified system of national qualifications in schools, vocational education and training and the higher education sector. The academic year in Australia varies between states and institutions, but generally runs from late January-early February until mid-December for primary and secondary schools, with slight variations in the inter-term holidays and TAFE colleges, and from late February until mid-November for universities with seasonal holidays and breaks for each educational institute. Preschool and pre-prep programs in Australia are relatively unregulated, and are not compulsory. The first exposure many Australian children have to learning with others outside of traditional parenting is daycare or a parent-run playgroup. This sort of activity is not generally considered schooling, as preschool education is separate from primary school in all states and territories, except Western Australia, where preschool education is taught as part of the primary school system. In Queensland, preschool programs are often called kindergarten or pre-prep, and are usually privately run but attract state government funding if run for at least 600 hours a year and delivered by a registered teacher. Preschools are usually run by the state and territory governments, except in Victoria, South Australia and New South Wales, where they are more often run by local councils, community groups or private organisations. Preschool is offered to 3 to 5-year-olds. Attendance numbers vary widely between the states, but 85.7% of children attended preschool the year before school. The year before a child is due to attend primary school is the main year for preschool education. This year is far more commonly attended, and may take the form of a few hours of activity during weekdays. Responsibility for preschools in New South Wales and Victoria lies with the Department of Education and Communities and the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, respectively. In all other states and territories of Australia, responsibility for preschools lie with the relevant education department. The average net cost for a long day care in Australia is $3.85 per hour, or a net cost of around $46 a day for a long day care service offering 12-hour days. School education in Australia is compulsory between certain ages as specified by state or territory legislation. Depending on the state or territory, and date of birth of the child, school is compulsory from the age of 5 to 6 to the age of 15 to 17. In recent years, over 3/4 of students stay at school until they are 17. Government schools educate approximately 65% of Australian students, with approximately 34% in Catholic and independent schools. A small portion of students are legally homeschooled, particularly in rural areas. Government schools are free to attend for Australian citizens and permanent residents, while Catholic and independent schools usually charge attendance fees. However, in addition to attendance fees, Stationery, textbooks, uniforms, school camps and other schooling costs are not covered under government funding. The additional cost for schooling has been estimated to be on average $316 per year per child. Regardless of whether a school is part of the government, Catholic or independent systems, they are required to adhere to the same curriculum frameworks of their state or territory. The curriculum framework, however, provides for some flexibility in the syllabus, so that subjects such as religious education can be taught. Most school students wear uniforms, although there are varying expectations and some Australian schools do not require uniforms. A common movement among secondary schools to support student voice has taken form as organisations such as Vic SRC in Victoria bring together student leaders to promote school improvement. Catholic and independent schools. In 2010, 66% of students in Australia attended government schools, 20% attended Catholic schools and 14% attended independent schools. In 2000 these figures were 69%, 20% and 11% respectively. Most Catholic schools are either run by their local parish, local diocese in their state's Catholic education department. Independent schools include schools operated by secular educational philosophies such as Montessori. However, the majority of independent schools are religious, being Protestant, Jewish, Islamic or non-denominational. Some Catholic and independent schools charge high fees, and because of this government funding for these schools is often criticised by the Australian Education Union and the Greens. Common ages: students may be slightly younger or older than stated below, due to variation between states and territories. The name for the first year of primary school varies considerably between states and territories. For example, what is known as kindergarten in ACT and NSW may mean the year preceding the first year of primary school or preschool in other states and territories. Some states vary in whether Year 7 is part of the primary or secondary years, as well as the existence of a middle school system. Primary. Kindergarten 3 to 4-year-olds, preschool/kindergarten, kindergarten/reception/prep/pre-primary national curriculum. This year level will be renamed Foundation Year, Grade Year 1, 6 to 7-year-olds, Grade Year 2, 7 to 8-year-olds, Grade Year 3, 8 to 9-year-olds, Grade Year 4, 9 to 10-year-olds, Grade Year 5, 10 to 11-year-olds, Grade Year 6, 11 to 12-year-olds, Grade Year 7, 12 to 13-year-olds. Secondary. Year 7, 12 to 13-year-olds, Year 8, 13 to 14 and 15-year-olds, Year 9, 14 to 15-year-olds, Year 10, 15 to 16-year-olds, Year 11, 16 to 17-year-olds, Year 12, 17 to 18-year-olds. Comparison of ages and year levels across states and territories. Students can undertake senior school studies for up to 3 years. Students who complete Year 12 under a reduced workload generally do this in 2 years, the latter being referred to as Year 13. Age to be in school: under the national curriculum being developed, the first year of schooling will be known as Foundation. In the Northern Territory, primary schools often include a preschool. In Western Australia, primary schools often include 2 preschool years. From 2013, South Australia will have 1 reception intake at the beginning of Term 1. In some states and territories, children that have been formally assessed and identified as gifted may begin school earlier than the stated minimum age. Additionally, gifted students may skip a subject or advance to a higher academic year level in schooling. Tertiary. Tertiary education in Australia is primarily study at university or a technical college in order to receive a qualification or further skills and training. A higher education provider is a body that is established or recognised by or under the law of the Australian Government, a state, the Australian Capital Territory or the Northern Territory. VET providers, both public and private, are registered by state and territory governments. In 2009, the Australian higher education system consisted of 41 universities, of which 37 are public institutions, 2 are private, and 2 are Australian branches of overseas universities. 3 other self-accrediting higher education institutions. and non-self-accrediting higher education providers accredited by state and territory authorities, numbering more than 150 as listed on state and territory registers. These include several that are registered in more than one state and territory. The non-self-accrediting higher education providers form a diverse group of specialized, mainly private, providers that range in size and include theological colleges and other providers that offer courses in business, information technology, natural therapies, hospitality, health, law and accounting. Federal departments. Education in Australia has been the responsibility of the following departments: Department of Education, Employment and Training, Department of Employment, Education, Training and Youth Affairs, Department of Education, Training and Youth Affairs, Department of Education, Science and Training, Department of Education, Employment and Workplace Relations, Department of Education. See also, Education or, Overview, Academic Grading in Australia, Australian Curriculum, Assessment and Reporting Authority, Australian Qualifications Framework, Australian Universities, University Admission, Education in the Australian Capital Territory, Education in New South Wales, Education in the Northern Territory, Education in Queensland, Education in South Australia, Education in Tasmania, Education in Victoria, Education in Western Australia, Performing Arts Education in Australia, Special Assistance Program, Tertiary Education Fees in Australia, TAFE, Qualifications, ACT Year 12 Certificate, Higher School Certificate the credential awarded for completing Years 11 and 12 in NSW, International Baccalaureate Diploma Program, Northern Territory Certificate of Education, Queensland Certificate of Education, School Certificate the credential awarded for completing Years 9 and 10 in NSW, South Australian Certificate of Education, Tasmanian Certificate of Education, Victorian Certificate of Education, Victorian Certificate of Applied Learning, Western Australian Certificate of Education, Tests, ACT Scaling Test, Queensland Core Skills Test. Overall position, NAPLAN, Olwell, Agencies, International Baccalaureate Organisation, Department of Education and Training, Department of Education and Communities, Board of Studies responsible for developing and maintaining curriculums and assessment credentials in NSW. Department of Education and Training, Department of Education, Training and Employment, Department of Education and Children's Services, Department of Education, Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority. Department of Education, Department of Education and Child Services, Lists of schools, List of schools in Australia, List of schools in the Australian Capital Territory, List of schools in New South Wales, List of schools in the Northern Territory, List of schools in Queensland, List of schools in Greater Brisbane. List of schools in South Australia, List of schools in Tasmania, List of schools in Victoria, List of schools in Perth, Western Australia, List of schools in rural Western Australia, List of universities in Australia, List of universities in Australia by enrolment. References. External links, Australian Education System, Education and Training International. The international arm of the Western Australian Government's Department of Education and Training. The official government school site, edna.edu.au. Education Network Australia website, Education Services Australia website, Educational Student Resource website, Studies in Australia, get in direct contact with institutions, Australian Qualifications Framework website, Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, Victoria website, Glossary of Australian Education Terms, Australian Bureau of Statistics 6278.0 Education and Training Experience, Australia, 2005, the National Education Directory of Australia Proprietary Limited, List of Australian universities and degrees by location, cost-benefit analysis relating to the implementation of a common school starting age and associated nomenclature by January 1, 2010, report prepared for the Ministerial Council on Education, Employment, Training and Youth Affairs, March 2006, Guide to TAFE Courses in Australia, Information on Education in Australia, OECD, contains indicators and information about Australia and how it compares to other OECD and non-OECD countries. Diagram of Australian education system, OECD, using 1997 ISCED classification of programs and typical ages. Also in country language, vocational education in Australia, UNESCO UNEVOC country profile. Soon. Generally, education in Australia follows the three-tier model, which includes primary education, followed by secondary education and tertiary education. The Programme for International Student Assessment 2006 evaluation ranked the Australian education system as 6th for reading, 8th for science and 13th for mathematics, on a worldwide scale including 56 countries. The PISA 2009 evaluation ranked the institutions, but generally runs from late January-early February until mid-December for primary and secondary schools, with slight variations in the interterm holidays and TAFE colleges, and from late February until mid-November for universities, with seasonal holidays and breaks for each educational institute. Preschool and pre-prep programs in Australia are relatively unregulated, and are not compulsory. The first exposure many Australian children. Education in Australia is primarily the responsibility of the states and territories. Each state or territory government provides funding and regulates the public and private schools within its governing area. The federal government helps fund the public universities, but was not involved in setting university curriculum. As of 2012, the Australian national curriculum, under development and trial for several years, has already been adopted by some schools and will become Australian education system as 6th for reading, 7th for science and 9th for mathematics, an improvement relative to the 2006 rankings. In 2012, education firm Pearson ranked Australian education as 13th in the world. The Education Index, published with the UN's Human Development Index in 2008, based on data from 2006, lists Australia as 0.993, amongst the highest in the world, tied for first with Denmark and Finland. Education in Australia is compulsory between the ages of 5 and 15 to 17, depending on the state or territory, and date of birth. Post-compulsory education is regulated within the Australian Qualifications Framework, a unified system of national qualifications in schools, vocational education and training, and the higher education sector. The academic year in Australia varies between states and